I'm Allison Jonjak, the Cranberry Outreach Specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. These videos are the on-demand recordings of UW Extension and the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association's virtual brown bag lunch series. These monthly sessions offer growers and researchers a way to share timely and relevant information. We hope you'll enjoy and continue to engage with us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Grant Holly. I'm the Executive Director of the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association. We are very happy to be able to partner with UW Extension to bring you the research needed to be able to navigate our ever-changing environment. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for their valuable time and leadership, the growers for joining us, and Allison for being the catalyst from which all of these sessions rely. Thank you so much.
Welcome everyone to the June 19th growing season updates Cranberry Brown Bag. We are just about to dive right in, and we have a really exciting day today. Dave, the senior ag scientist with Ocean Spray, is going to give us our updates from the field. Scott Provost from the Department of Natural Resources is going to give an update on some really exciting nitrogen research that they've done in central Wisconsin in some of those high nitrogen areas on how cranberries interact with the water. And then Hannah Gaines-Day is going to give us an overview of honey hive stocking information. I'm going to do a quick, for housekeeping, go ahead and leave yourself muted unless you are asking a question, but if you'd like to ask a question, please do unmute yourself and ask. We also have the chat open and going, and I'm monitoring the chat. So if you would like to ask a question in public, you can ask it directly, or you can ask anonymously by using the to Allison, and then I'll ask it anonymously on your behalf. For other details beyond that, I believe we have closed captioning on, so you can hit the ... more and then show closed captions if you enjoy reading along as we go. Other than that, I think I did actually see Grant on today's Swift. Grant, you wanted to give a little 1-minute hello, and then we'll hand things off to Dave.
I'm just going to say thank everybody for showing up. You did not come to hear me talk, so I'm going to kick it over to all of our speakers. I love the run up today, and the water resources piece is something that we're all excited about, and thrilled to be able to see all kinds of visitors here for today. All righty, folks, take it away.
Awesome, thank you. And Hannah, I will stop sharing my screen so that you can share yours. And do everyone feel free to ask questions, whether those are directly in the chat or to Allison, and then I can ask at the end of the session. But questions for Dave, questions for Scott, and I will. I know Hannah, this is just the beginning of Scattered Blooms, so we are looking forward to some honeybee hive information.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much for inviting me to come talk today. So today I'm going to be talking about some work that I actually did quite a while ago during my graduate work. This was a study from 2012. So if you were at 2014 Cranberry School, some of this will look familiar. And otherwise, I hope that this is useful information for you. Let's see here. Okay. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that this work wouldn't have happened without the grower collaborators who provided data for me, and then the funding sources that provide money so that we can actually do our work. So Wisconsin cranberry growers use on average 2 to 3 hives per acre of honeybee hives during cranberry bloom. This totals about $5 million in Wisconsin each year for paying for honeybees for cranberry bloom, which is a lot of money. So is 2 to 3 hives per acre the right number, or is there a different number that you should be using? Are you spending too much money on hives and not getting the benefit from those hives, or maybe you're not using enough hives and you could be missing out on more yield. So to address this question of how many hives per acre growers should use, I collected data from 38 cranberry marshes for the time period 2000 to 2011. And I was very lucky that cranberry growers are very good at keeping records. And so the data I asked for was the yield information, marsh-wide yield information, and the number of hives per acre for each of those years from 2000 to 2011. And then what I was interested in looking at was, what is the relationship between hives per acre and the yield? And can we figure out what the optimal number is by looking at this data? And so when we first look at the data, each of these points is 1 year at one farm. So each farm has multiple points. And we find that as you increase the number of hives per acre, the yield is also increasing, which kind of makes sense. And that's what you might expect. But coming into this study, most of my work was looking at how the landscape around marshes influences the wild bee community. And we know that wild bees really respond to landscape and habitat in the landscape. And so we thought, well, maybe honeybees are responding to landscape. So let's see what happens if we put a landscape variable into this data. And when we do that, what we found was that this relationship, the positive relationship between hives and yield per acre, only holds true in marshes with low woodland landscapes within about 1 kilometer. So if you look at the land cover within about 1 kilometer of that marsh, the marshes that had less than 40%, about 40% woodland, still had this very strong relationship. And marshes that had more than 40% woodland had no relationship at all. So it was there's no increase in yield as you increase the number of hives per acre at those high woodland landscapes. Now you might look at this pattern here and say, oh, well, maybe this is driven by all of these high hives per acre in the low woodland landscapes. But even when we exclude those, this relationship stayed true. So the low woodland landscape marshes had a strong relationship and the high woodland marshes had no relationship between yield and hives. So how does this influence the optimal number of hives that you should use on your marsh? So we took this data and we put it into this table that's sort of like, you might think of it as like a lookup table. And so what we're interested in looking at here was, if you look at on the left side here, we have the percent woodland. And on the top of the table, we have hives per acre. And the yield here goes from blue is lower yield and red is higher yield. And so you can say, okay, you know, if I'm in one of these percent, if I'm in 30% woodland around my marsh, you can look across and see where's the optimal number of hives to benefit my yield. So for example, if you're we'll just walk through this scenario right here. If your marsh has 10% woodland in the surrounding landscape, and you bring 1 hive per acre, the predicted yield based on this data was between 180 and 234 barrels per acre. Statistic yield of 143 to 210 barrels per acre. There's overlap between these predicted yield numbers. And so statistically, you're not better having 1 hive versus 0 hives. Another way of looking at this is if we put the numbers from that table into a chart here, we have yield on the bottom axis here and hives per acre on the left axis. This is our 10% woodland site. If we put in our predicted yield at 0 hives, 1 hive, and then go all the way up to 7 hives per acre, which was the maximum for in this data set, you see that once we get to 2 hives per acre, there's no longer an overlap with the yield at 0 hives per acre. So 2 hives per acre is statistically better than yields than expected with 0 hives per acre. But then when we get up to the higher end of this, we see that at 6 and 7 hives per acre, the expected predicted yield overlaps with hives at 5 hives per acre. And so the statistically beneficial range of hives per acre for this marsh at 10% woodland is 2 to 5 hives per acre. If you're below 2 hives per acre or above 5 hives per acre, you're not seeing a benefit in your yield. You can look at this again for example, 80% woodland. And you can look at, when we put this onto this chart, you see that the yield prediction for 0 to 7 hives per acre overlaps completely. And so your yield at 7 hives per acre at this marsh with 80% woodland is statistically no better than yield at 0 hives per acre. So the beneficial range here would be 0 hives per acre. Above the 0 hives, you're not seeing a benefit. So this is sort of an overview of that table showing you the statistically beneficial range of hives per acre. So if you're in this 10 to 40% woodland in your landscape, 2 to 5 hives per acre is what this data would recommend as the ideal number. If you're about 50% woodland, it's a little tighter, 3 to 4 hives per acre. And then if you're above 50, so 60 to 80%, 0 hives per acre, according to this data, would be the best number of hives to bring. So this data does have some limitations. This is a predictive model based on correlations between hives per acre and yield on a subset of marshes on a pretty small time scale. So maybe if we had more marshes or a longer time scale, we could get into some more details here and have a more fine-tuned prediction. The other thing is that honeybees are not the only thing that contribute to yield. There's so many other things that you guys do on your marshes that contribute to yield. And so we're sort of ignoring a lot of other things when we just look at hives per acre and yield. So the outcomes will vary from marsh to marsh depending on what you're doing on your marsh, what management practices you have on your own marsh. And so how many hives should you use? Well, it depends on the landscape around your marsh. And in this case, we're saying about 1 kilometer, which is within the flight range of honeybees. When we look at sort of a snapshot of the land cover in the main growing region of the state, this is a snapshot of central Wisconsin, and then I've color coded it based on the land cover in each part of the counties. And so you see that the blue areas are areas with high woodland, pink is medium woodland, and red is low woodland. And each of these little white shapes here are cranberry marshes. And so you can see that there are a lot of marshes in Wisconsin that fall into this high woodland category, which based on this data, the correct number of hives is actually 0 hives per acre. But then you can see there's also a lot of hives that fall within the pink and red areas. And so how can you figure out what the landscape is like around your marsh? 1 kilometer is a little bit bigger than you can sort of like just look and say, oh yeah, I'm mostly woodland or I'm mostly not woodland. And so I wanted to very briefly tell you about a tool called Beescape that was developed by our collaborators at Penn State. And so you can go to this website called Beescape, and there's a QR code and a website on the right side of the slide here. And what you do is you up in this upper left corner, you can put in your address. And so just for an example, I put in the research station's address here so we can take a look how it works. So you put in the address, and then it brings you to that, just like in Google Maps or whatever, it brings you to that location. And then you can click on, you can drop a pin, just like in Google Maps, you drop a pin and say, this is my center location. And it spits out for you what the land cover is in that, within surrounding that marsh. And so here on the right-hand side, it spits out the output here. And we can see that at the research station within this is in 1 mile, but in the 1 mile range is 82% woodland. So then if we go back to our table here, a marsh with 80% woodland, based on this data, we predict that 0 hives per acre is the correct number of hives to have at that marsh. So in the future, we'd like to collect more data related to this. We're waiting on some funding right now to see if we get funding to continue this work. But in the meantime, we have, many of you might be familiar with the WiBee project we've been working on the last few years. And so we'd like to start looking at the WiBee data and look at how the WiBee pollinator visitation rates vary by landscape to see if we can pull out any patterns. And then we'd also like to get some data on local management practices and variables that are related to yield that are not related to honeybees to see if we can sort of tweak this model to get a better number for people. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. I have links if you want to explore WiBee data or if you want to take a look at Beescape to figure out what your landscape is like. That is all right here as well. And these are,
I'll also launch the poll Hannah had. So while we're letting questions come in, either and please only answer these if you are a grower rather than if you're a researcher or somebody from an agency. Let the growers answer these, but on your acreages and what your honeybee, bumblebee, and wild bee stocks are. I didn't mean to cut you off there. I just wanted to let them both answer questions while you're finishing up.
Yeah, Yep.
And then if people have questions, whether those be for Dave or for Scott or for Hannah, we've got the chat open, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself. And then I guess while we wait for those poll results, I'm going to go through and share some upcoming events. On the 25th, which I believe is a Thursday, there's going to be an organic field day at James Lake Farms, and that's going to feature John giving some information on some of the intricacies of organic transition and also organic production. The summer field day you should have on your calendar already is August 12th, and that is going to be at the Cranberry Innovation Center. Also NACRU, which is the not quite every other year, but occasional conference for cranberry research and extension workers. That's going to be August 10th through 12th, and that's hosted in Madison this year. It was in New Jersey last time, and it'll be further away next time. So stay posted for events about that. We are not going to have a July brown bag, as this is my I'll miss you all very much. This is my last brown bag, but you will be able to go to that go.wis.edu/cranberry brown bags and you'll be able to see all of the past sessions. I'm going to go ahead and share the results of this poll now. And it's maybe kind of new data to see. I guess it'll be harder to see the fill in the blank answers, but universally people do notice other wild bees on their marsh. And I guess we'll have the, all right, so yeah, acreage is grown range from 50 up to 190, and then honeybee hives stocked, and yeah, you'll be able to check them from 2 up to 250. Bumble quads from 0 up to 75, and then again, everyone sees those wild bees on their marshes. Biggest concern related to pollination on your marsh is wet springs. So those are hopefully good questions for you. And yeah, thank you, Dave. I want to thank Dave. I want to thank Scott. I want to thank Hannah. I want to thank everyone who's hopped on these calls. I have really enjoyed bringing research to growers and connecting growers with research and letting people ask questions. A big thanks to the Growers Association's Education Committee, which has always helped come up with ideas for content that you want to see. So do continue to be involved with that education committee and make sure that good research is being shared with growers and growers are able to share back with researchers. Thank you all so very much. I'm going to end this recording and I will see you all in the future. Here we go.